Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's still time to submit a question for our speakers. You can use the chat window to do it. In the meantime, I do have some questions here. And the way I'm going to present them is I will direct it to one of the members of the panel, but other members will have a chance to weigh in should they choose to. So, Alison, this first question is for you, and it is, did the recent covered funds proposal address the topic of seeding RICs and foreign public funds?
Great, thanks. Thank you for that question. So the answer is not really directly, and the issue there, as some of you may know, is that if you go back to the beginning of the presentation, you'll see that the term banking entity excludes covered funds, but it doesn't exclude funds that are excluded from the definition of covered fund. So as a result, and this is an issue with foreign excluded funds as well, if a banking entity controls a fund that's excluded from the definition of covered fund, then the fund itself could be a banking entity subject to the Volcker Rule, which in the case of a registered investment company or a foreign public fund is kind of impossible, because then it can't prop trade and do what it needs to do. So there's been guidance over time, including in staff FAQs, about when RICs and foreign public funds would be treated or not treated as banking entities during their seeding period and thereafter. And the proposal doesn't actually, although this came up in previous proposals, and I think the industry has commented on this issue, it wasn't directly addressed in the proposal, the one in January. The preamble does say that the staff agency FAQs are not disturbed unless explicitly stated. So presumably the FAQs that exist relating to seeding RICs and foreign public funds are still in place. And for those of you who also follow the control rule, the final control rule issued by the Fed that came out the same day as the covered funds proposal actually included a footnote saying, the changes to the control rule don't affect the treatment of seeding RICs and funds under the Volcker Rule. So I guess we'll see if people make comments on this issue when the comment letters come out on the proposal, but at the moment, the FAQs are still in place, and there wasn't any direct response in the proposal.
Thank you, Alison, for that response. Does anyone else care to add to this discussion that we just had here with Alison? Anything to add? Or I can go to a fresh question. All right, then let's go to a fresh question. This is from Mark and Jiang. Do you have any advice for a foreign bank revising its Volcker Rule compliance program in light of the recent amendments?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think the first step, of course, is to conduct the analysis to determine, which class that you would fall into, whether you fall into a bank entity with significant trading assets and liabilities, moderate or limited. For those with significant and moderate, a lot of bank entities already have pretty extensive compliance programs in place under the previous rule. So for those with significant trading assets and liabilities, not much change may be required. If you were under the enhanced compliance program requirements, which are no longer in place, you could eliminate those from your program, but the same 6-point compliance program still applies to you. For moderate, there might not be, if your organization is already operating under controls that are working for you, you may not want to make too many changes since you've already done the work to prepare the programs. For limited, you're no longer required to demonstrate compliance with the Volcker Rule, so that means you don't have to have a compliance program in place. But there are, as Andrew mentioned, there are some, exemptions that you may be relying on that do require certain compliance type controls. Like if you're relying on the presumption under the Rent D presumption for the market making exemption, you'll need some controls in place. Also, down the line, if your trading activity increases, you may, fall into a higher category. So it might be good practice to retain some of the compliance elements that you've already prepared in case you escalate into one of those other categories. But for the most part, you could eliminate a lot of the more burdensome parts of your program while retaining some of the elements that make sure that your organization remains in compliance. I don't know if Jiang has anything to add.
No, that's really well said.